It's happening right now, and it's more urgent than you think. The Iranian regime is on the brink of collapse. Streets in Tehran are lined with the dead as protests escalate to a boiling point. But here's the twist. This crisis isn't just shaking the Middle East. Thousands of miles away, it's starting to choke China's economy. The very lifeline that Beijing has clung to for 2 decades, cheap oil from regimes like Iran and Venezuela, is now unraveling before their eyes. And as the oil flow slows down, China is realizing the true cost of its strategy might be far greater than anyone imagined. So why is China's future hanging by a thread? And how did we get here? Stick with me, because the next chapter in this story is about to get even more intense. So, how did we get here? For 20 years, China thought it had outsmarted the world. While the U.S. and its allies tightened sanctions on countries like Iran and Venezuela, China quietly stepped in as the buyer of last resort. While the West hesitated, Beijing was buying oil on the cheap, locking in long-term deals with some of the world's most isolated regimes. It looked like a perfect strategy. Buy more oil than anyone else, but pay less than everyone else. The U.S. couldn't touch it, and China seemed invincible. But now, in 2026, the bill for that cheap oil is coming due, and China's empire built on discounted energy is beginning to crumble. Here's the big question. Can China survive this collapse? What happens when the very oil lifeline that has powered their rise starts to slip away? Stick around, because what comes next will show you just how fragile China's future really is. Now, here's where it gets really dangerous for China. Beijing didn't just buy oil. They bought a front-row seat to a revolution they can't control. When China turned to Iran and Venezuela for cheap oil, they were betting on a steady supply to fuel their booming economy. But the truth, they were betting on unstable regimes that could crumble at any moment. And that's exactly what's happening right now. As Iran's protests spiral out of control, Beijing is exposed. Every shipment of oil that arrives from Tehran now carries the risk of disruption. And when that happens, it's not just a logistical nightmare for China, it's a financial disaster. This isn't just about oil anymore. It's about survival. If these oil supplies get cut off, China could be facing a catastrophic strategic collapse. And guess what? This isn't just a possibility, and it's already happening. The tension inside China's energy system is so tight, one small spark could bring the whole thing down. The situation is already escalating fast. But here's where things really start to unravel. China's bet on Iran and Venezuela wasn't just risky. It was a gamble that has now become a ticking time bomb. Think about it. China has tied itself to 2 countries that are in turmoil. Iran is now in the middle of one of its most unstable periods in decades. Protests are flooding the streets. Inflation is skyrocketing. The value of the rial has crashed. This isn't just some short-term issue. This is systemic, and it's getting worse every day. In the past, this kind of instability would have been a wake-up call, but not for China. Instead, they doubled down. They thought they could weather the storm by securing cheaper oil from these sanctioned regimes, ignoring the long-term risks. But now that strategy is falling apart, and it's only going to get worse from here. And the real kicker? While China thought it was securing cheap energy, it was also securing a front-row seat to a revolution that could blow up in their face. But the cracks in China's strategy aren't just theoretical. The reality is hitting hard right now. Take a look at the situation in Iran. Beijing has become Iran's lifeline, buying massive amounts of oil at a discount, saving Chinese refineries billions. But now, every barrel that reaches Chinese shores is more uncertain than ever. The oil is still flowing, for now, but it's increasingly unreliable. Shipping companies are backing off. Insurers are pulling out. The risk of sabotage, strikes, and logistical breakdowns grows every day. And this isn't just some political issue. It's a direct financial hit. If the oil supply from Iran is disrupted, even for a short period, China will be scrambling. They'll have to buy oil from somewhere else, and that means paying higher prices, something they've worked for years to avoid. This could completely throw off their energy strategy and destabilize their economy in ways they can't easily fix. It's not just about losing cheap oil. It's about losing a key part of their entire system. So here's what you need to understand. What once looked like a clever deal has turned into a massive gamble, and China can't afford to lose this bet. Now, things are moving faster than anyone could have predicted. In the span of just a few months, China's oil strategy is already under pressure from multiple sides. First, there's Iran, where the entire oil infrastructure is on the verge of collapse. Protests are now spilling into refineries and export terminals. Even a minor disruption in production could send shockwaves through China's economy. And it's not just Iran. Venezuela, another key supplier, is slipping deeper into chaos. Maduro's arrest has left the country politically fractured, and the U.S. is already moving to redirect Venezuelan oil to its own shores. But that's not all. On top of that, Russia, China's last major fallback, is struggling under the weight of its own problems. Sanctions, war, and a crumbling energy infrastructure are making Russian oil deliveries more unreliable by the day. Beijing thought it could rely on Russia to fill the gaps left by Iran and Venezuela, but now that's in jeopardy too. What happens if this continues? China could face a perfect storm where all its energy lifelines are failing at once. Now let's zoom out for a moment. This isn't just about politics, economics, or global strategy. This is about real people. And you might be feeling this more than you think. When oil prices spike and energy supplies become unstable, it's the everyday person who feels the burn. In China, factories start slowing down. Costs rise, prices at the pump go up, and that affects everyone from the worker on the production line to the family in the suburbs. These disruptions ripple out, quietly but powerfully, weakening the economy from the inside. And it's not just China that's impacted. The instability in Iran and Venezuela is shaking global markets. The price of everything goes up, food, goods, services, and it hits the poorest the hardest. If this crisis continues, it will create a wave of economic strain that could last for years. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments, because you're not the only one who's starting to feel the pressure. So what's really going on here? It's easy to blame unstable regimes or bad luck, but the truth is much deeper. This whole crisis is a result of how China's energy system was built. For years, Beijing has relied on leveraging cheap oil from places like Iran and Venezuela to fuel its economy. But that leverage was always built on instability. China bet on regimes that were already fragile, thinking that its size and influence could withstand any collapse. The problem? Leverage is a double-edged sword. When these regimes fall apart, so does China's power over them. But it goes even deeper. China's entire strategy was built around a false sense of control. By relying on countries under Western sanctions, China thought it was immune to global pressures. But now those pressures are starting to choke the system. The truth is, China's energy security wasn't about strength. It was about avoiding the real costs of reliable, stable oil. And now those costs are becoming too big to ignore. So where does China go from here? Right now, Beijing has two paths ahead, and neither one is clean. The first option is to try to double down even further, leaning harder on Russia for oil. On paper, Russia seems like the logical choice and a massive oil producer willing to offer discounts. But here's the catch. Russia is also facing its own collapse. With sanctions, the war in Ukraine, and an energy infrastructure falling apart, relying on Russia might be just as risky as relying on Iran or Venezuela. Or the second option, change the game entirely. For the first time in 2 decades, China might have to pay a higher price for stability. It could start looking to more reliable oil suppliers, countries that don't need a revolution to keep the barrels flowing. But this comes with its own cost. Higher prices, new risks, and the reality that China might not have the leverage it once did. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. China's energy strategy has to change. The question is, which way will they go? And which choice will put the most strain on their economy? That's the cliffhanger Beijing is facing right now. At the end of the day, China's mistake was simple. It mistook cheap oil for security. Beijing thought it could gamble with unstable suppliers and get away with it. But now, that gamble is turning into a full-blown crisis. The entire energy web that China built over the last 2 decades is unraveling, and they have no easy way out. In the face of this chaos, the only path forward is the one they've avoided for years: paying more, spreading the risk, and finally securing oil from countries that don't need a revolution or a military escort to keep things moving. This isn't just about oil. It's about the future of China's economy and the risks it's willing to take to keep growing. If China can't get a handle on this, it's not just an energy crisis, it's a global one. What happens next? Well, you won't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications, because the next chapter in this story could be even more explosive than the last.